On this map of India, the state of Nagaland occupies a small corner of the northeast, but inside its borders, the government operates under a completely different set of rules. As the 16th state of the Union, its status is defined by a constitutional anomaly known as Article 371A. This means that acts of the national parliament regarding religion, social practices, or the ownership and transfer of land do not apply here. For a national law to take effect, the Nagaland State Assembly must first vote to accept it. Nagaland has a population of barely 2 million people. How did a community this size successfully negotiate such a sweeping level of autonomy from a massive central government? To find out, we have to look at the world they built before outside empires ever arrived. Prior to the 1820s, the geography of this region served as a natural fortress. The steep mountain ridges and deep, misty valleys kept the tribes in a state of almost total isolation from the surrounding plains. Within these hills lived 16 distinct major tribes, including the Angami, Ao, Konyak, and Sumi. Separated by the terrain, they operated under a bedrock principle: absolute village sovereignty. The heart of every village was the morung. These youth dormitories were military finishing schools where young men mastered the arts of warfare, memorized their oral history, and were trained to defend the independence of their specific ridge. This was a fierce warrior culture that recognized no higher authority than their own village gates. They traded with neighboring kingdoms, but they never submitted to them. This isolation was shattered in 1832. When British officers attempted to find a route from Manipur to Assam, they were met by Naga warriors who saw the intruders as a direct threat to their sovereign land. For the next few decades, the British conducted punitive expeditions to stop tribal raids on their tea plantations. The conflict peaked in 1879 at the Battle of Konoma, where Angami Nagas fought a legendary defense against the colonial military. By 1881, the British established the Naga Hills District. For the first time in their history, the tribes were formally annexed into a colonial administration. On paper, their political independence was broken, but in the villages, the spirit of defiance remained entirely intact. While the British provided the administrative pressure, American Baptist missionaries provided a linguistic bridge. By introducing Western education and a shared Roman script, they allowed tribes with completely different dialects to finally communicate with one another. This unification accelerated during the First World War. In 1917, the British deployed 4,000 Nagas to the trenches of France as part of the Labor Corps. In the mud of Europe, men from 16 tribes realized they shared more in common with each other than with the empires they were serving. They went to France as members of separate villages. They returned with a unified Naga identity. World War II turned their home into a global pivot point. The 1944 Battle of Kohima, often called the Stalingrad of the East, saw some of the most brutal fighting of the Pacific Theater. Surviving a global conflict on their own soil emboldened the Naga National Council. As India moved toward independence in 1947, the NNC began to demand that the Naga people be allowed to govern themselves. In 1951, the NNC held a plebiscite to prove the depth of this sentiment. They reported that 99% of the population had voted for total independence, a result that created an immediate and profound tension with the newly formed Indian state. When no agreement could be reached, the region was plunged into a dearth period of civil unrest and armed conflict that lasted for years. Seeking a way out of the violence, moderate Naga leaders formed the Naga People's Convention. They wanted a pragmatic solution that would protect their identity without continuing the war. Their negotiations with the Indian government resulted in the 16-point agreement. This document outlined exactly how a new state would function within the Indian Union. On December 1, 1963, Nagaland was officially inaugurated as the 16th state of India by President Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. This brings us back to Article 371A. The specific protections for land and custom that we saw at the beginning of this story exist because they were written directly into the Constitution as a result of that 16-point agreement. This clause represents the modern evolution of that ancient baseline, village sovereignty. The same fierce independence that once defined their warrior culture had been successfully codified into the highest law of the land. Today, that focus has shifted toward cultural tourism and development. The Hornbill Festival has become the global face of the state, where all 16 tribes gather to celebrate a heritage that is no longer under threat. By surviving empires and navigating world wars, the Naga people protected their most sacred legacy, the unbroken right to define who they are and how they live on their